The paper bag was still warm from the bakery when I heard the ambulance sirens fading down the street behind me, and the moment Corinne Ashworth opened her door, before I could even say her usual order was inside, she grabbed my wrist with both hands and whispered, "Don't go yet, please, I don't have anyone else to call." If you believe in kindness, in second chances, in the quiet ways strangers become family, take a moment right now to like this video, drop a comment, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to our channel, because stories like this one deserve to be remembered together, as a community that still believes people can save each other. My name is Wyatt Colson, and for 3 years I had been delivering groceries to the same brick townhouse on Larch Street every Tuesday and Friday afternoon, always before the sun dipped too low, because Corinne never liked opening her door once shadows started stretching across her porch. She was 26, maybe 27, though she carried herself like someone who had already lived through several lifetimes of exhaustion. I never asked too many questions. That was the unspoken rule between a delivery driver and his regular customer: you smile, you hand over the bags, you say something light about the weather, and you leave before the silence gets uncomfortable. But Corinne was different from my other stops. Her eyes always looked like they were holding back a flood, and her hands trembled slightly when she reached for the bags, as if the weight of 2 gallons of milk was somehow heavier than it should be. I learned early on, mostly through the things she let slip without meaning to, that she was caring for her younger brother, Desmond, who had been in a car accident 4 years earlier that left him with a spinal injury and a body that no longer obeyed him the way it once had. Their parents were gone, a fire, she mentioned once, quickly changing the subject before I could ask more, and it had just been the two of them since she was 22, an age when most people are still figuring out who they want to become, not raising a disabled sibling on a diner waitress's paycheck. I used to see her scribbling numbers on the back of receipts while I set the bags on her kitchen counter, always subtracting, always frowning, always looking like she was one bad week away from losing everything. There were times I noticed she didn't order as much as she probably needed, cutting corners on things like fresh vegetables or the pain medication cream Desmond used for his muscle spasms, and I started, without ever mentioning it to her, rounding down the delivery fee in the system myself, eating the difference out of my own tips so it wouldn't come out of her tight budget. It felt like such a small thing. I never wanted her to know. I told myself it was just good business, keeping a loyal customer happy, but if I'm honest, it became something more than that. Corinne's resilience, the way she thanked me every single time like I had done something extraordinary just by placing bags of pasta and canned soup on her counter, made me feel like maybe my job, something I once considered just a stopgap after losing my construction position, actually meant something to somebody. The rising conflict began on an ordinary Friday, the kind where the sky was a flat, bleached blue and the heat made the pavement shimmer. I pulled up to her house and noticed her car, an old silver hatchback that hadn't run reliably in months, was gone from the driveway entirely, towed or sold, I couldn't tell. When I knocked, it took nearly a full minute before she answered, and when she did, her face was pale in a way I had never seen, her eyes rimmed red, her voice cracking as she tried to sound normal and failed completely. She told me Desmond had been rushed to the hospital that morning after his oxygen levels dropped suddenly, some complication from his condition that the doctors were still trying to understand, and that she had ridden with him in the ambulance, only to be told she needed to go home briefly to gather paperwork and his insurance documents before they could proceed with an urgent procedure. She said the hospital was a 40-minute walk since she had no car and no money for a rideshare, and that she was terrified of not making it back in time. I didn't think. I just said get in the truck. She hesitated, the way people do when kindness catches them off guard after years of expecting disappointment, but she climbed in, clutching a folder of papers to her chest like it was the only solid thing left in her world. During that drive, she finally told me everything, how she had been quietly selling pieces of her mother's jewelry to cover the medical bills insurance didn't touch, how she hadn't slept a full night in years, how she sometimes stood in the shower and cried where Desmond couldn't hear her, because she needed him to believe she was strong enough to carry them both. I told her, and I meant it with my whole chest, that she was one of the strongest people I had ever met, and that whatever she needed, she wasn't going to face it by herself anymore, not while I was around. We made it to the hospital in time. Desmond stabilized, though the doctors said it had been closer than Corinne could bear to think about, and for the following 2 weeks I found myself showing up not just with groceries, but with rides to appointments, with phone calls to insurance companies on my lunch breaks, with quiet company on the hospital bench outside Desmond's room while Corinne slept for the first real hours of rest she'd had in months. Desmond, when he was well enough to talk, turned out to be sharp-witted and funny in a way that surprised me, cracking jokes about hospital food and asking me pointed questions about my intentions toward his sister that made my ears burn. He told me one afternoon, in a quieter moment, that watching his sister carry their entire world alone had been the thing that broke his heart more than the accident itself, and that seeing her let someone else share the weight, even a little, was the first time in years he'd seen her shoulders actually relax. But the story doesn't move in a straight line toward happiness, not yet, because 2 weeks later, just as Desmond was being discharged and things seemed to be steadying, I received devastating news of my own. The delivery company I worked for announced sudden layoffs due to a corporate restructuring, and my name was on the list. I remember sitting in my truck outside the warehouse, staring at the termination email, feeling the ground shift beneath a life I had only just begun rebuilding meaning in. I didn't tell Corinne right away. I didn't want her to feel like she owed me anything, or worse, that my help had strings attached that were now unraveling. For nearly a week I avoided her street, ashamed, unsure how to explain that the man who had shown up with groceries for 3 years now had nothing steady to offer, not even the job that had connected us in the first place. It was Corinne who found me, not the other way around. She tracked down my number through the delivery service's old paperwork and called me on a bright Saturday morning, her voice firm in a way I hadn't heard before, telling me that Desmond had noticed grocery deliveries had stopped and had practically interrogated her until she admitted she didn't know why either. When I finally told her the truth, bracing for pity or worse, indifference, she surprised me completely. She told me about a small community market 2 streets over from her house, one that had been looking for a delivery coordinator, someone who understood the neighborhood and cared about the people receiving the bags, not just the paycheck. She had already mentioned my name to the owner, an older widow named Beatrice Langford who ran the shop with her adult daughter, and Beatrice wanted to meet me that very afternoon. I got the job within a week, and it paid better than my old position, but more than that, it let me stay connected to the exact community I had grown to love without realizing it, the porches and doorsteps and familiar faces that had quietly become my second family during my rounds. Corinne and Desmond became more than customers after that. They became the kind of people I called on Sunday afternoons just to hear how their week had gone, the kind of people who showed up at my apartment with a lopsided homemade cake when I finally got approved for a small business loan to start my own local delivery service 6 months later, one built specifically around helping families like theirs who couldn't always afford to ask for help out loud. Desmond, with physical therapy and a stubborn will that never seemed to run dry, regained enough strength to transfer himself between his wheelchair and a modified car Corinne eventually saved enough to buy, a milestone that made her cry harder than I'd ever seen her cry, though this time from something other than exhaustion. Corinne herself enrolled part-time in night classes for medical billing, something she'd always wanted to do but never believed she had room for in a life so consumed by survival, and she told me once, sitting on that same porch where she used to accept grocery bags with trembling hands, that the day I drove her to the hospital wasn't the day I saved her brother's life, though it felt that way at the time. It was the day she remembered she was allowed to ask for help, that needing someone didn't make her weak, and that the 3 years of quiet kindness before that day had been building a foundation she hadn't even realized she was standing on. Before we close this story, I want you to sit with the lesson inside it for just a moment, and if you have a moment, leave a comment below sharing a time when someone's quiet, consistent kindness changed the course of your life, because those small acts, the ones we almost don't notice ourselves doing, are often the ones that matter most to someone else. If this story touched your heart even a little, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey, because our community grows stronger every single time we choose to believe in second chances, in forgiveness, and in the simple, powerful truth that no one should have to carry everything alone. Corinne and Desmond still live on Larch Street, and every Friday afternoon, without fail, I still stop by, not because it's my job anymore, but because some doors, once you're let inside them, become impossible to ever really leave.